Hey, BSP superfans. You're currently listening to episode number 12 of the Black Swamp podcast. This is where we've been giving you a chance to eavesdrop a bit on conversations with Black Swamp artists and educators. As usual, please feel free to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and tell your friends, coworkers, students, mail carriers, whoever about the episodes you're hopefully enjoying here. There's a lot of great content out there if you're into podcasts, so we always appreciate you tuning into our series. So before we get into this extra special episode of our podcast, I wanted to drop a gratuitous plug for one of our video series, and that's the orchestral sessions. Over the last few years, we've put Junior on the spot here as we've asked him to play sort of common orchestral excerpts, rotating through various Black Swamp instrument options. All this is performed to an orchestral backing track. It's stressful for him, but helpful for you as you have a chance to hear all our various accessory options side by side and in context with the music you might be practicing or performing on a regular basis. You can check out the series on our website under the video content tab on our homepage or by following the link in the show notes for this podcast episode. That's all if Nathan does his job. Well, hopefully you've seen by now, 2020 marks Black Swamp Percussion's 25th anniversary as a manufacturer. We've experienced overwhelming support and growth over the last 25 years, which really all began with Eric sort of deconstructing and tinkering in his basement almost 3 decades ago. Sorry if that makes you feel old, buddy. So today we have part 1 of a special 2-part series where Jamel and I pull out the big guns and pull Eric into the BSP podcast studios for an in-depth conversation on his beginnings. Sort of what I call a BSP Origin Story to help celebrate our 25th anniversary. We ask a lot of questions, and Eric never disappoints with details and historical tidbits from his early years. So let's get started.
Well, Tim, do you want to open us up here?
So what do we do now? Yeah. So thanks, Eric, thanks for sitting down with us. I know you.
Is that the official start?
I think so. I think we started. We talked about our coffee. Did everybody have their coffee?
Check.
I finished mine.
Okay. Because we have to try to stay awake while we're doing this.
Because my stories are going to be so boring.
Super interesting. Thanks for sharing. But we thought, well, been doing some more traveling. Like we'll go see dealers. We'll do university visits. Go to see vendors, trade shows and stuff like that. And one thing that always kind of seems to come up is what's your story? Tell us your story. And so we thought, okay, this must be important, and maybe we could take kind of a little opportunity to get your story.
Yeah. Off of what Tim's saying is, I know you look at it, and probably because you told the story, you probably feel like a million times, and you might think it's boring, but it's actually all of those, the little small parts of the story. I was just telling Tim before we got in here, every time I hear you tell the story to someone new, I've been here almost 11 and a half years, there's almost like a new little tidbit or something. There was one time you told me the story before about how you've started, and then, I think it was when you were in Adrian, Michigan, and your garage didn't have gas, so you ran a gas line to it. We'll put a disclaimer on this ahead of time that
right.
you
don't try this at home. Right.
But
whoever owns that house now, there's an illegally run gas line that goes from the house.
Right.
But it's buried deep enough that it won't freeze.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I didn't know that much.
Will it explode?
I just didn't have a permit. That's a little technical.
Well, I mean, I think it just really shows the
how little money I had.
Well, yeah, as a beginning company, and just the mental fortitude and not wanting to give up and not letting the fact that you couldn't get heat stop you from building a company. Right. So, tell us about how you started. Maybe in college or
I want to go back further.
You want to
Yeah,
go
maybe-
back
I want to
further.
go. Wait, tell us about the day you were born.
Yeah,
Eric.
conception.
No. Well, like, I mean, obviously you had some musical talent. I don't remember seeing you. You've tried to golf. I don't think I've ever seen you try to play basketball or anything. But so maybe you're not so sports inclined. I'm the exact same way. But like, so obviously you were playing music at a young age. I mean, I know your dad had a wood shop or some sort of shop in your basement.
You've got it all wrong.
Already from the beginning.
No, you don't have it.
Oh, okay. And then you were a tinkerer. So I don't know if you can tell us kind of how that started when
Sure.
you were young.
Sure. Can you hear? Can you hear me nod my head
Yes.
over
How's
the
my
radio?
hair? How's my hair, by the way?
That's
So as far back as I can remember, really, it's I guess you could say it's been in my DNA to tinker with things, to take things apart, put things back together, figure out how things work. In my neighborhood, Wednesday was the garbage pickup day. So Tuesday night, my dad and I would sometimes go out and we'd drive around the neighborhood. We'd drive up and down the streets looking for things.
Were you dumpster diving?
Basically in people's yards. And so we'd find things to either restore or kind of make work again, whatever, my dad found that he thought he could use. One specific thing that was my particular project was a vacuum cleaner. And my mom she bragged about that thing for years and years and years, how I got this vacuum cleaner and I took the whole thing apart and made the thing work again.
My boy.
It's just, I'm so proud of you. You and your vacuum cleaner.
Right.
So my dad had a workshop. We had a small little house and he had a 1-car garage, but we had a basement too. But he always had a lot of different hobbies. And one of his main hobbies was antique clock restoration, refinishing. And that was kind of his side hustle, his side job. And later on, all those clocks helped pay for my college. But he did that since he was in his 20s, and he was really good at it. And little side story, I met Mel Blanc at one of the clock conventions. Yes,
wow,
they have
cool.
clock conventions, antique clock conventions.
Still? Are there digital clock?
It was,
conventions?
it was in St. Louis, so I got to meet Mel Blanc, and he did Daffy Duck's voice for me.
Oh,
I remember
that's
that. Kids, Mel Blanc is the guy that did all the voices for Bugs Bunny,
Yeah.
Daffy
Looney
Duck,
Tunes.
Looney Tunes, and that type of thing. So, in case you're out of the loop on who Mel Blanc is. And I must have said Siri because
Hello.
my phone is turning on. Okay. The first instrument I can remember making was in grade school. We had a project for class. I don't know if it was class or art class or whatever. To make, I don't remember if it was specifically make a musical instrument or if it was a craft or something, but I decided to make a banjo. And yeah,
That was my banjo.
I named it Deliverance.
Okay. Brilliant.
No.
Okay.
So I got a cigar box from my grandpa. He was a cigar smoker, so one of those cardboard cigar boxes. I got a piece of wood from my dad for the neck. So the cigar box was the body, piece of wood for the neck. And I don't know, somehow I crudely attached those things together and rubber bands for the strings. So that's the first actual instrument I ever made.
Yeah.
It didn't sound very good.
I can't imagine it, but it sounds like a quality of assembled-made instrument.
So it won't be a Black Swamp future product.
No, not the banjo.
It did not have a solid wood tone ring, single ply tone ring. So that was the first little instrument I made, and going forward, so that was in grade school, and then, I can't remember all the specifics, but I just continued to always be making something or working on something. I used to work on models, plastic models as a kid. I did a lot of those. What else did I do?
So did you actually find things to and take them apart and try to rebuild them or just see what was inside of them. Because Jamel, we were talking earlier, and Jamel kind of did that. He wasn't able to actually put things back together. I didn't do any of it. I was too afraid to break something and my dad would get mad at me or whatever. So I just left things alone and trusted that they worked.
I was into slot cars also. Does anybody know what slot cars are even?
It's a car with a slot, maybe?
A
radio, not a radio control.
I don't know if those are much of a thing anymore,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it was called the Slot Shop up the street from me, up on Cleveland Street.
I think the
And-
Boy Scouts still do that now.
Oh, yeah?
I think I always see like signs outside, slot car racing.
Oh,
you know.
yeah. They make their own, or they...
Yeah, but I started making little chassis for slot cars, and they sold. They would sell them for me. There's just a few here and there. It wasn't anything big. Yeah, and I also let's think a couple other things. The Synsonics drums.
Oh, drum pads?
Drum pads.
Yeah.
It was was that made by Casio?
I don't remember.
No, it was made by Synsonics.
Okay.
I think. You have
Wait,
one.
I do? I took it home.
Oh, you took it home.
Yeah.
Where
But
did-
I do have one.
Yeah, you do
just
have
not
one.
here. It's at home.
So it was a box. It was about the size of a. It was about the size of a scale,
Oh, okay.
like a weighing scale, or the size of a big picture album. And it had 4 little pads. And
I have one of those.
And it has. You have one of
Yeah,
those.
it's in Sonic.
And so I was a big prog rock fan, and back in that day, the Simmons electronic drums, the hexagonal drum pads that Bill Bruford made really popular.
Right.
Bill Bruford, the drummer for Yes, the real drummer for Yes.
Oops.
Oh, I didn't say that.
I'm a little bit.
No,
I'm more of an Alan White fan.
Alan
but
White's
it's okay.
great.
Yeah.
I got started on Bill Bruford though for Yes. That's why my heart's attached to him.
Mhm.
Anyway. So I wanted to use those within my drum set. So I ended up taking that thing apart. I took all the little piezo, I guess they're little no, they're not piezos, are they?
Yeah,
Little-
that
Little contacts, triggers.
Yeah.
Took those out, and then I made my own pads. So I cut wood discs. I got some clear Lexan,
Wow.
and I remember the little pickups were right in the middle, and underneath the Lexan on top of the wood, and I ran all the wiring and everything like that, and added, and they actually worked.
How old were you? That was like high school or something?
No, it was like junior high.
Holy cow.
It
I was playing Nintendo in junior high, by the way.
It was, and I made my own little bass drum and hi-hat pedal too, out of parts from Radio Shack. It was a little simple little lever that with a foot pedal you would push down, and when you push the pedal down, it would slide this little slider forward and hit this little button. I mean, you couldn't play it like people play today, or else it would be destroyed on one hit. But it would play the hi-hat, it would play the hi-hat, and it would play the bass drum. So
Yeah.
I kind of had that within my setup. I don't think I ever
You
really...
didn't tour with those?
I was in a band called Morning Star when I was a kid.
Was that the band with your brothers?
That was a band with my brother.
Ah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, my other brother played for it later on. So that was one of the early Christian rock bands.
The Soy Brother band.
Yeah. The demo tape is still floating out there somewhere.
Yeah.
4 songs that took us, I think, 4 or 5 years to make, or something like that. Maybe not that long. No, not that long. But yeah, that was fun to make that little Synsonics pads and set that up within my setup. And my drum kit at that time was a beater kit that my dad and I found somewhere on. Back then it wasn't the classifieds. There wasn't the Craigslist. It was classifieds.
In the paper, yeah.
So we found this old kit, and my dad's main job, his regular job, was running a group of auto parts stores, and one of the stores had a paint booth. So we stripped them all down and smoothed them all out. They were the crappiest shells on planet Earth, and we painted the shells. And again, I didn't have the money for. I had a paper route for many years. I did paper route. Did a couple of them at a time. That was mostly in junior high, but I would make my own cymbal stands. Braze the cymbal stands together. They couldn't they couldn't collapse. So I had to put them in cars and hopefully they didn't shred the upholstery and stuff like that because they were sharp little.
So like the tripod was always open?
Yes, it was always open. They were bolted onto the tube, but they were always open.
Yeah.
And back then the rack systems started getting really popular. So I made my own rack system.
Oh yeah, sure.
So I could put my tom-toms up on a rack. That was really cool to have it like that.
Yeah.
And so my kit was a Franken kit.
Yeah. So this was in like Cleveland area, Elyria, Ohio.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Elyria is southwestish of Cleveland, about a half hour outside of Cleveland. That's where I grew up.
Yeah.
Very kind of a industrial industrial area. A lot of different ethnicities. It's a very migrant-rich area. You know, I'm a bunch of different things: Hungarian, Russian, Dutch. I'm a mutt. So that's where I grew up, and
I think it's pretty interesting, like how you were talking about, you know, you built a drum set and you've taken things apart. I mean, I as I grew up, I would take things apart. Putting them back together was kind of a different thing, especially like the 80s brands toys. It wasn't, I thought you would kind of open it up and discover something really cool. And then you just discover like a really small circuit board inside like a really large piece of molded plastic. Yeah. But as you were doing that, like when did you have the epiphany that this is, I mean, it sounds like as you were growing up, you were always going to be a builder, be an engineer or something. But when did you get it in your head that, you know, I want to make musical instruments?
Well, that wasn't for a long time, actually. That wasn't for quite a while. I mean, in high school, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't really think that far ahead, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And my parents, you know, God bless them, they're still alive. Love my parents. You know, it was just a kind of a different era back then. And they, you know, my parents, my mom went to college for a little while, but my dad didn't. He was kind of old school, bootstrap worker kind of guy. And it's not that they didn't support me going to school, but it's not like that they kind of made sure that I had my ducks in a row. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe they thought I did. I'm not sure, but I didn't really. I mean, it was much late. It wasn't until after college, after grad school, that I really decided to make a go of it with sort of a business.
Right, but you knew you wanted to go in something music related.
Yes, that is correct. I did want to do that. First year out of high school. So through high school, I was in the marching band. I played in that band, and we actually played a lot. You
high stepped with a drum on a sling.
Yes. And actually one of my old high school friends found an old video of us playing in the park, in Elyria Park. And it was a shocker. It was like, wow, that's a blast from the past. Right. Somebody videotaped it. Who knows what kind of recording device captured that video back in 1980. It was probably 83 or 84. Well, I graduated in 1985, so that was my early 80s is my high school years.
Right.
And I was going to go into the robotics program at the local community college. That, again, the robotics was just getting its feet going. Right. And I was going to do that. The issue was with math with me. Is it
because you saw the Terminator? You think you wanted to go into robotics then?
Yes, I wanted to make that liquid metal.
Right. Or what was the one with the other robot?
T-1000.
Yeah, or no, the one that Short Circuit, the movie Short Circuit.
Johnny Five. Wow.
Never saw it. Thanks for including me.
Oh, sorry. You should check it out. It's like a robot.
Well, I think that's always the really interesting part too, in terms of, you have a background in music performance and music, ethnomusicology, correct?
Right. Yeah. So after I roamed around a bit, after high school, I ended up at Bowling Green State University, and they have a Balinese gamelan there. They had a small little. They have a bigger one now, but they had a small little gamelan, and they had a gamelan ensemble. So I got involved with that, but that was undergrad. So I played in that, and so through this whole time, even undergrad, I would come home for holidays, summers, and I would still be building something. Mm-hmm. There'd be something I would be doing. Might not be specifically percussion or music related, but I always had this. I remember this. I had this weird during college when I wasn't building something. It would be like building up in me. I just had to do something with my hands. I had to build something, create something, or do something like that. That continued on. So I knew that was a thread. So once I graduated from Bowling Green with a percussion performance major, I'd gotten married, and we moved to where we are now. It's the Holland Zealand area, which is on the west coast of Michigan, near Grand Rapids. And I did a lot of freelance work. And
so this is between undergrad and grad school?
Yeah.
Oh,
so there were 2 years. You didn't know there were?
I know a lot about you, but I didn't know that.
See, what did I tell you? That's the whole point. You learn something.
I figured you went right from undergrad to grad school, and
no, we took 2 years off.
Oh, okay.
My wife Julie, she worked. What did I do? One of the years I worked at Walter's Gardens, which is her side of the family's greenhouses.
Right.
Big operation, actually. Quite a big operation. So I did that, and then at night I would come home and I would practice. We lived in the upstairs of a house. Mrs. Etta Lokers. She was the
good old Etta Lokers.
Etta Lokers. She was great. There would be bats that would get inside the house sometimes, and you'd hear her crashing around with a bat with a broom
with a bat, trying to get the bat.
And that apartment, the little apartment, was so small. I remember it was $250 a month. It was everything included.
Wow.
Which wasn't too bad, but it wasn't like it was super cheap. But everything was included, and I had my marimba, little 4-octave Deegan marimba, in my bedroom, and I just had barely enough room to stand between my bed and the marimba to play. And I would kept on practicing mallets, and worked out on the pads, snare drum pad or practice pad. Did get to play some with the Grand Rapids Symphony during those 2 years.
Oh, cool.
And also with the Mesquite, what's it called now? It used to be called the West Shore Symphony.
Yeah.
It's called the
West Michigan
Symphony, which is based in Muskegon. So I played there, and then did gigs and that type of thing.
Right.
And during that time, we decided we were going to go back to school, and we went back to Bowling Green, and I was in the, I was in the music history department. It was going to be a music history emphasis ethnomusicology degree, because they didn't have an actual ethnomusicology named degree. It was a concentration.
So why ethnomusicology versus like a performance degree, like a percussion performance degree?
Because I was fascinated by it, and I decided that I was going to play as much, or if not more, than the percussion people,
right?
Which I ended up doing. I played if I would have gone through the hoops, I could have gotten a master's also.
Right.
But I thought, well, I'll have this other degree because I was kind of thinking going down the academic route. But I still got to play it. Still was just super involved in the playing side of thing, and that was with Roger Shoup when Dr. Roger Shoup came to Bowling Green for his first years there. Rest in peace. He passed away a few years back. Remained close with him for many years. He was a really big influence on my life. And then at the musicology side, I did a lot with Roger Shoup and Steve Cornelius. We played in a trio together.
Right.
We would do different types of drumming trios and Amadinda and kunga and hand drumming type things. Bata, we did a lot of bata because that was Steve Cornelius's specialty. And let's see what else.
You traveled.
Yeah, that was after the first year of grad school. Got to go to Indonesia, Bali, for the summer, and that's what my master's degree thesis was going to be about, and that's specifically the people who make gamelan instruments, the carvers, the gong makers, the people who make the bronze parts. And so I spent the whole summer there we were a group of 6 of us from the school that went there, and my wife and I stayed the longest, and we went all over the place and learned a little bit of the language, and it was, that was an adventure of a lifetime right there. Right. So that's where I gathered my field work for my master's thesis.
Oh, okay. And so had you started, I mean, I was always under the impression that you kind of started making a few instruments here and there during school, but you're saying that kind of started happening after grad school?
I think I was making some bamboo timpani mallets.
Right.
During grad school. I don't specifically remember. I think I might have been dabbling in it.
Well, that's what I've been telling everybody. So if you could just
Yes.
verify that.
Exactly as you say.
Yeah. Well, I always find that really fascinating because, you don't have an engineering degree. I always kind of tell everyone about, your background as music performance, ethnomusicology, and, most people today have, in order to get those ideas out of your head, you have some kind of like, they've gone to school for engineering or something. And when I tell people you don't, you've done a lot of kind of figuring it out yourself,
right.
and which I always find, super interesting. How off that branch, how did you started making timpani mallets? At what point, though you've pulled things apart and put them back together, but how do you had an idea for a mallet or what you wanted in terms of a sound, as you were just, as I guess Black Swamp, or may not have been Black Swamp at the time, was
right.
in its infancy. But how did you get that, translate that idea from your head to, paper or into reality? I mean, we'll talk about later about how, I see some of the stuff you have, the prototypes of like strainers that you made out of wood just to kind of get it out, as you learned CAD on your own. But as you were, I guess out of college, trying to figure out how you wanted to, how to achieve the sound that you wanted out of the instrument you wanted to make.
What I found, which I find interesting, is that making instruments, first of all, you go through a lot of iterations. It's just a constant search and a constant redoing and trying new things and trying to figure out not only how to make it, but you can't just, that's like, we have some vendors that do things for us also. And sometimes it comes down to, well, things have to be a certain way because it has to sound a certain way. can't just perform. It can't just be a certain way. It also has to sound right. And what I found through making instruments is that it makes you listen in a different way than I think it develops different listening skills than being a musician only develops.
Right.
Because you have many perspectives on maybe a single type of mallet. You change one little thing, you see how that changes it, and that all that stuff just kind of continues to compile itself and turn into, it develops. I think it's developed within me a better intuition, because early on, you don't know what you're doing. I mean, I absolutely didn't know what I was doing in any of this stuff.
Right.
I was just doing things, just trying this, trying that, seeing what it sounded like, seeing what affected what. And as the years have rolled along, I think I've gotten better at being able to shorten the time of trying to make something work correctly, sound right.
Just because you sort of have the experience, like the builds knowledge.
Yes. And it's hard to put a finger on that.
Right.
Hard to put a finger on how that really developed. But developing ears and building things, just like anyone around here at Black Swamp, by building stuff, whether they know it or not, their ears are better because they're hearing stuff all the time, and they're
sort of like osmosis.
Yeah. And if you do something a little bit differently here, it's going to make something sound a little bit different, just automatically.
I could speak to that. Being a bass player and going to school for music.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm the only musician in here, unfortunately. No, but off of what you're saying, I find that to be true, because when I came in, I mean, I knew what a snare drum sound like, but I didn't know what my ear wasn't trained to look for what a great snare drum sounded like. But as I would hear Tim and you tuning snare drums and kind of associating, wow, the different reactions with the sounds. Like now, I mean, I can definitely pick out, wow, that drum really sounds great. I mean, just from the moment we take it off the bench to the moment, or quite the opposite way. If, there's something wrong with the head or something like that, it's like, oh, that just sounds really funky. Now, far be it from me to go and start tinkering and tuning. I leave that to the experts. But in terms of, making sure the precision is there when building it. And as Eric was saying, you kind of pick up an ear for what it should sound like, just over time, the more you work and building it. So I find that to be true as well.
And I have to, can't discount early on. And I mean, this goes on today even, but very early on, especially with the tambourines, there were, just a couple professional tambourines on the market at the time. Mm-hmm. And they were quite different sounding. For example, the Grover, the Lafima, which is a German tambourine, very, very different sounding. You had your kind of, dare I say, cheap rock and roll type, tambourines. Right. And, it would start with the question of, what's a tambourine supposed to sound like? What is it supposed to sound like anyway? I don't know what it's supposed to sound like. I played tambourine, sure, but it's a lot different than a violin, because tambourines can sound so different. I know, don't kill me. I know violins can sound a lot different, but within a percussion family, you've got so many different types of sounds. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Right.
What's a tambourine supposed to sound like? So what I started doing is contacting big name players, people who have, made it, people who have the ears, and there's a reason why they're where they are. For example, Chris Lamb, I basically chased him down at a PASIC conference one time. I had one of my early tambourines with me.
Right.
So just for the record, sorry, the timpani mallets were the first product line, and then tambourines came second, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. So that's what I wanted to just back up for a second. Like, how do you even go to? I think I'm going to build a tambourine today, or was it like I have a sound in my head that I want to be able to hear live? Or is it like, or on one of your other projects, like when you were in college or high school, it's like, yeah, I think I can do this, so I'm going to. Or, what kind of led you to want to build a tambourine?
Tambourines specifically, I just didn't think there was available on the market a tambourine that was in the old school spirit of super high quality tambourines that had a steam bent shell, single ply shell, and super high quality cap. I mean, there was, a tambourine on the market that had a ply shell. And I know some of the people some of the players I talked to would not use those tambourines because they had other ideas of what a tambourine should sound like. I won't name them out of innocence. So I just,
so you kind of had a concept or a sound of something that you wanted realized.
Yeah. And Kevin Harlan, who's a friend of mine, he had made tambourines, but had long since stopped making tambourines, and Roger Shoup had one of the Harlan tambourines.
Mm-hmm.
And I always really liked the sound. It was the kind of a heat-treated German silver, and that's one of the sounds I was going for to kind of bring that back. And our chromium is not the same sound. It's somewhat similar in that it's a kind of a crunchy,
right,
gritty sound, I call it, as opposed to more of a pure ringing sound, which would be the German silver. So the way I came up with the chromium jingle was, again, just through experimentation. And sometimes with building instruments, I do something. I have no idea where I come up with trying something, a certain thing, but it just sort of happens.
Right.
And I'm like, wow, that works. I don't know why it works. I had no idea that it would work, but this works. And then you just refine it and then you make it repeatable.
I mean, I think that's true. I mean, even today, like one of our latest projects were the Legacy Bronze Triangles. And there was a lot of experimentation on your part, I know, but like you just tried something to see what would happen, and that ended up working.
Yes. Yeah. And there were some, little tweaks to it, but yeah, once you like get on the right track.
Right. And then making it repeatable, obviously, is like, okay, we have to do this consistently and repeat it and make sure it's consistent.
Yeah. And that's the part of the challenge. I obviously am not out there making every single instrument. I mean, it's just, we've grown to a point where it's
Jamel.
It's
Jamel's
not
making
gonna
every
happen.
single.
Actually, he is making every single hammered triangle. So,
yeah, that's true.
But I mean, before we even get to the jingles, which is a main part of the tambourine. I mean, had you ever? I know you were talking about how you wanted a steam bent shell instead of a ply shell. Had you ever steam bent anything prior to even?
No.
Because to me, that's amazing. Like, what point do you say I'm going to try to bend? I mean, for giggles, once I just threw some wood in a bucket once and tried to bend it over a form
with sheer muscle,
and trying to. So and I was pretty much done after that. That trial was like, nope, too hard. So I mean, it kind of speaks to the stick-to-itiveness of, like, I mean, that's the beginning of a company, and I know some of that's the excitement of trying something new. But I mean, at what point do you wake up in the morning and say, yeah, I'm going to try bending some ash and not be discouraged?
Right.
Well, I chose.
Did you have to Google it?
Yeah, this was before
that's
Google.
Right, before the internet, before the internet was on. Hey everyone, it's me again. Just a friendly reminder, you were listening to part 1 of a 2-part Black Swamp origin story. So we'll have part 2 of Jamel and I's conversation with Eric Sooy coming up in a few weeks, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for listening.
This has been a BSP production, recorded and produced out of the Black Swamp Percussion facilities in Zeeland, Michigan. Audio assistance by Nathan Coles. And music by Adam Hopper.